Visual hierarchy is a visual design principle which designers use to show the importance and get their attention. It's the order in which the human eye perceives what it sees.
Divine proportions, the golden ratio is a magical number 1.618. The lowercase Greek letter pi is used for the golden ratio. Designs that use proportions defined by the golden ratio are, it's believed, aesthetically pleasing. Then there's the Fibonacci sequence. Each term is the sum of the two previous terms, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. The interesting thing is the two seemingly unrelated topics produce the same exact number. Many artists and architects use proportion to approximate the golden ratio. A famous example is the Parthenon built in ancient Greece. So if our lateral plate is 960 px divided by 1.618 equals 593 px, you know that the weight of the content area should be 593 px and the sidebar 367 px. If the website height is 760 px tall, you can split it into 470 px and 290 px chunks. 760 if over 1.618 equals 470.
Higgs law. This law is named after the American psychologist Ray Hyman and the British psychologist William Higg. So it is known also as the Higg-Hyman law. It says that with every additional choices increases the time required to take a decision. This Higgs law, we experience this countless times at restaurants. Menus with huge options make it difficult to choose your dinner. And this is similar to the paradox of choice. The more choices you give, the easier it is to choose nothing. Both principles come into play with web design. The main purpose of Higgs law is making the choice easier for users, and it can be seen or displayed in a control display, drop-down menus, contact pages, sign-up forms, button selection, and navigation. As shown here in the pictures of the Facebook website, we have the navigation icons, settings, sign-up forms, control display buttons, because Higgs law is applied to help organize, minimize, categorize, and present navigation, contents, images, and function of a user.
Fitts law. Fitts law stipulates that the time required to move to target area is a function of distance to the target and the size of the target. In other words, the bigger an object and closer it is, the easier it is to use. On the Facebook webpage, as we see, the My Day or the picture in the timeline is bigger among of all, in which it is easier to see or top the location. Like Fitts law states, the bigger and closer it is, the easier it is to use. But it said bigger isn't always better. The tiny button inside the red box that is located every edge of the page, it's because when using a mouse, you cannot move the pointer outside the edge of the screen. So, we can point easily at the edges and corners, which makes it easier to locate the target.
The rule of thirds tells you exactly what to share and how often. It takes the guesswork out of posting and engages your audience. It's a guideline and not a mathematical formula. So the point is to balance your social posts so that they aren't all about you. So the best example inside the Facebook website that shows the rule of thirds are the pages inside the website. Since Facebook is a website, the rule of thirds inside the Facebook is different as it have two important elements, which is the content curation and engagement to prove that they are showing and following the rule of thirds. So there are two important elements in Facebook website. So for the first element is the content curation. In the content curation is where you can see all the contents inside the page in FB website, such like the posts, informations, and links that you guys found it in the about part of the page or in the caption of the main posts. So for the next element is the engagement, where it is about interacting towards your audience, such like liking your followers' posts, answering their questions, and responding to their comments. And the most important is making the context of your posts more relatable and fit towards your audience. So these are the two important elements in Facebook website. So I'm going to discuss the difference between the two elements. So again guys, the difference between the content curation and engagement is that content curation is all about content, or from the name itself or from the word itself, content. So the content inside the page in FB website. So while the engagement is all about interacting towards your audience. So such like liking your followers' posts, answering their questions, and responding to their comments. So it is about all to interact with your audience.
Gestalt design laws. Gestalt psychology is the theory of the mind and brain. Its principle is that the human eye sees objects and their entirety before perceiving their individual parts. Law of proximity is when people group these together that are close together and they become a single perceived object, which means that the elements are the same but still look separate from one another. So it is stated from PowerPoint presentation that we made. Next is the law of similarity. It's just we group things together, and it's just the relation between similar elements. By means this principle used to organize elements by size, shape, color, and more.
The law of closure is one of the Gestalt design laws. Usually, if there is a break in the object, we perceive the object as continuing in a smooth pattern. For example, in the picture below, we tend to see some kind of shape which separates it. We like to see as simple of a figure as possible. To put it simply, we see completeness. When shapes that aren't close or parts of a picture are missing, our perception fills in the visual gap, and that is what we call the law of closure. Law of symmetry. The law of symmetry is a Gestalt grouping law that states that elements that are symmetrical to each other tend to be perceived as a unified group. Since mind perceives objects as symmetrical, forming around a center point. Law of common fate. We tend to perceive objects as lines that move along a path. We group together objects that have the same trend of motion and are therefore on the same path. The Gestalt law of common fate states that humans perceive visual elements that move in the same speed or direction as parts of a single stimulus. A common example of this is a flock of birds. When several birds fly in the same direction, we normally assume that they belong to a single group.
Gestalt's principle aimed to formulate the regularities according to which the perceptual input are organized into unitary forms, also referred to as wholes, groups, or groupings. These principles mainly apply to vision, but there are also analogous aspects in auditory and somatosensory perception. In visual perception, such as forms are the regions of the visual field whose portions are perceived as group, and past experience is reminiscing memories through the year.
Since we already know the definition of white space, I am going to directly tell you where we can see it in the Facebook website. Look at the picture. Notice that white is a prominent color. However, white space does not necessarily mean white. It can be of any color. In my newsfeed, white spaces are the gap between each of my friends' stories, and it is also the margin or border of the post. And in this specific post, there is a large white space as the picture didn't take up the space intended. In my profile, there are also small gap between my friend's profile picture and their name, which make it more balanced and harmonious. Lastly, in my information, there are spaces between my address, the school I went to, and my status. The gap in between each line can be considered white space.
Hey everyone, I am going to discuss about the Occam's razor. So in the picture shown, we can see that the picture at the top has a lot of elements, making it hard to focus. However, in the picture below, the website becomes less crowded with elements, therefore giving less choices to choose from. We can also tell that the Facebook website has a minimalist design, which is a very smart move from the designer, because from the definition of this principle, simplicity is the best option.